Today we're going to install a EPS system on a 2017 Sidewinder. It's a fairly simple process. It's a little more tedious just due to the fact that we're working in a small area. We would be pulling the seat, the hood, the side panels for start. Then we'd move on to the front bumper and such. When I get to that point, I'll show you. Off to the right, we have all the parts needed for the EPS. The mounting brackets, the stops, the main bolts, the EPS system itself, the new steering shaft. And then over here we have already put together the harnesses. This will be the ground and power. And this will be the main information harness that we will tap into power later on towards the end of the install. Okay, the seat's off, side panels are off, the hood's about to come off. Don't forget to unplug this. Any accessories that's plugged into the hood, release the clips on the side, and pull back and lift it off. Now that we have the hood off, we are going to remove the pipes. Mine are double clamped aluminum pipes, but in a factory setting, you would have a single clamp on each side. You would remove the clamp that goes to the turbo, then one that goes to the intercooler, then the intake, and then the outside of the intercooler here, and then the one on the blow off. And then you can pull these pipes out. Once those pipes are out, then you can move to the front piece. There's a screw, torque screw on the outsides, two on the insides right here. Once those are removed, then you would take off the Torx here, and then there's one under the pipe here which will have access once the pipe is removed, and then you will have one here. Once I have that removed, I'll show you what needs to be removed next. Tubes are removed, panels are removed. You got to remove the fuse box, so you got to get under the clip a little bit, pull up. There's one on both sides. Kind of move him out of the way a second. And then if you haven't done this, you're going to want to put a little piece of felt or something underneath it, because it's known on the older Sidewinders that these will rub through. It's also good to put a zip tie in there and then cinch up on all these wires here, which will also help keep the fraying down. And if you leave this little bit of the end down, that'll help hold it up as well. So I'm going to pull the front bumper. Then after that, I'm going to pull the little plate that has all the sensors. So those two bolts will be here, and that will be after the bumper comes off. These were pulled off with the panel. Then around the side here, there will be a Torx here, and I think it's a 3/8 down here. It's kind of an odd duck. It's got a slot in it. So once that, and then there's a main screw under here. I have a bumper on, but there's a main Torx screw here. And then there's two just in the back of the plastic, two Torx screws. I'm going to remove all of those. Okay, we're going to strap that stuff out of the way now that we have the valve bank out, the fuse box. We will release the CDI down inside here because we will have to move that. We will also have to relocate the voltage regulator to the nose cone. There's two screws here. So now that the voltage regulator and the CDI is pulled out of the way, there's 4 rivets here that are going to have to be drilled out. Basically, we're just going to take and shift this over about 3/4 of an inch. Gives you just enough clearance. There's a crossbar that lays in here next to the wiring that could interfere with it, and I don't like the way. Now, you don't have to relocate this. If you can find another way to fiddle your wiring in there better, so be it. Maybe put some notes down in the bottom and let me know what you've come up with. But I found the best way to do it is to just move it over. On a stock unit, there's plenty of wiring. They actually flip the CDI around, so the wiring now goes out the opposite side. In this case, the wiring's too short, so I can't do that. Then we're going to come down over here. Before I start laying out holes and drilling holes, I'm going to go ahead and pop this off, this boot off, because I need to get to the steering bolt and the tie rod bolt. So I got the CDI mount out. So basically what I'm going to do is, you can see the old holes. I just bring this back till that corner touches. And I'm going to put new holes in here for the, this is just enough to be able to get that CDI shifted back roughly, you know, 5/8 to 3/4 of an inch. You can see the, I'll put some center, I'll center spot it and drill it. Okay, I drilled these out. Got the rivets in here. I got one started to help line me up. You can see on the inside here, you should be able to see the rivets sticking through on that bracket right there. We'll pin that down, and then that's all you need to do for the CDI. Okay, we're gonna drill the 2 in to mount the CDI, and then I'm gonna slide this back here. And then we have to drill 2 into this side of the bulkhead for the bracket for the EPS, and then the other end of this bracket, there's one further down here. I'll lay them all out. Once I get them laid out, I will show you the layouts with the dimensions to give you an idea of what you need to do. So this was the voltage regulator holes. Now I just have pilots in here for now so I can show you the dimensions. I misspoke. I said these were going to be the CDI. It's not the voltage regulator. So basically, from this edge, roughly, you are going to go 3/4 of an inch to center, and then 3.5 to that one. So 3/4, 3.5, and then down from here, you're going to go, I usually bump up underneath, but we can hook it on the top. So it's about 5 1/8, about 5 1/8. So this one down here, I go 1 5/8 from the body panel. And then from the bottom, it will be 1 inch. This one should be 1 9/16 from this edge. And then from here should be 1 1/8. Then on the second hole, we're going to go be 3 3/8 by 6 7/16 from this side. You can see I'm off just a smidge, so I'm gonna have to drill that hole over a little bit. I have these all drilled out to 11/30 seconds. I need a little room in there because it is hard to get everything lined up. So then I also take, before I drop this bracket all the way down in the bottom, we're going to drill this one out up here. Right here, we're going to drill this out a little bit to give us a little bit of clearance to get this bracket sits on the belly pan and holds the EPS mount. It's really tough to align, so you need a little bit of room for movement to get it. Once it's clamped on, it's tight. The voltage regulator was pinned up with a zip tie here. I cut that zip tie because it's nice to tuck this behind once the power steering gets put in. The voltage regulator is now mounted to the front. The CDI is now strapped in. You can see, we'll go upside down here, voltage regulator. There, it's all ready to roll. And now we're ready to pull the steering shaft, which is going to be, if you look here underneath, there will be a main shaft nut up there, and then this tie rod bolt right there has to come off in order for us to get the other shaft out. Then we will remove these that hold the riser on. Just set the riser down on the tank. You can put something there to protect the tank. And then you want to pull these two bolts here. Once we get to that step, we'll come back. To get to the tie rod bolt, if you turn the skis, the end of the bell crank will tip out and you can get your 17mm on there. And as you're reefing on it, because it's pretty tight, you can put your hips against the skis to keep it from rotating and it'll come right out. So with the boot pulled back, you'll want to stick 17mm up in here. Both this and the bell crank tie rod is the same, 17mm. You can go right up in here. It helps have a little wobble end extension on there. And then you pull that out. These two 10mm bolts are out. Remember the bell crank is all loose down there. Those are all removed. I'm going to take these two 10mm bolts out in a second, but right now we took off the two clamps on the bottom, so my bar should be ready to come off. And then we just kind of roll that to the side like that. So that's out of the way. We take these two 10mm off like that, and then you're going to pull this piece. This is going to be reused. The piece underneath will not be reused. We have a new shorter piece that goes on with a stop. We'll show that later on. So this is tipped down and it's off. This is off. So what we're going to do is you got to kind of pick up and pull out of the bell crank down on the bottom. And then this will come out, but it takes a little bit of finesse to get it in the right position to get it out. And the right position never cooperates. So, yeah, I lift it up on it a little bit. Lift it up on the front a little bit and it comes through. And then it should just slowly tip out, just like that. As you look at all the parts here, I've already put on the clips for the brackets, which is also part of the ordering process. When you put this on, this is your bottom bell crank. There's a little flat spot in the gear. Right there, you can see a little flat shiny spot. So when you slide this on, you make sure that that flat shiny spot goes right in that slot. And then that's where you push that on, and then you put your bolts in. Get this mounted before we try to drop this into the hole. You'll be tightening this with a 3/8 on this side and 7/16 on this side. So what I usually do is I take this bracket, make sure the angle part is down, drop it down inside there, just kind of pull it out of the way a little bit, because that bracket has to be underneath and it's really tough to get in there if you don't get it in there now. Okay, there's a little trick to getting this guy in. So drop the bell crank down inside and you bring it over, and you're gonna have to pivot it to the right to get the shaft to swing by, and then she drops right in. Now this looks a lot easier because I've done it many times, but it's not as easy as you think. But you could get lucky and it could go right in. Now the next thing is then you just set this on its side, get the bell crank up, and you grab the flat bracket, this flat bracket, and this has to go in like this. Basically it's going to go against the side, but it has to go into there. So this is a little bit tricky because this has to go on inside here. So you kind of gotta fiddle with the bell crank a little bit, and then she'll drop right on like that. So now when you have this inside, the head is going to be to the down, like that. So what we do next, and I know it's a little bit of a cumbersome task here because there's a lot of stuff in the way, we have to get this bracket mounted on here with all 4 screws, and then you pull out the bottom screws once the tops are tight, because that also gets bolted to the bottom bracket, which we have to do kind of from underneath. But you want to make sure it's in the right orientation. So head down, and you can see the pin for power is up. Now we're going to take a couple screws and start threading them in. And this is where you might scratch up your hands a little bit. Putting these on isn't too bad. It's getting the other guys on the bottom when you have to bolt it to the lower bracket. And the only ones I would suggest tightening up would be, and you have to put all 4 in, otherwise if you tighten these ahead of time, this bracket could shift enough, and when you're trying to get these in, they will not go in because there's a bracket is in the way just slightly. So basically we just stick them in hand tight, like such. And then we're going to tighten these right away. These 2 are tight, these are loose, but we have to pull these out because it goes through the bracket on the bottom. Now, you got to bring this guy up and over, and maybe even get him started into the hole in the bell crank. I'm gonna have to spin that crank around a little bit. There, you kind of hear it go in. Now, in this position, make sure this voltage regulator cord is up, out of the way. Now, you should be able to put a screw in to kind of help you hold this thing in place. But don't tighten anything, just put them in slightly. At this point, nothing gets tight. So I'll put this top one in. So the toughest part, as you can see, you have to get that bolt on, and then there's one up underneath where you really got to twist your arms around to get it started. But once you got this one in, you know, if you use a little wobbling, and this is where you don't put any of these in, none of that hole, none of that, none of the bracket mounting screws go in. You're right, the whole object right now is to try to get this bracket started. And right now, we're doing really good. So we'll move on to the next one once I get that other one in. And that one has to be done from the top. So once you get that lower screw on, don't tighten it. Just get, 3/4 threads on. Then you can lift this bracket, slide it over, and this you can get right from under here. You can feel it drop in the hole, get a couple turns on it, and then from here, you tighten both this one and the other one completely before you put your other screws in, the brackets that hold it into the chassis. Okay, all of my 4 screws are tightened on the main EPS system. Make sure those are tight before you get all these main chassis screws in part way. About 3/4 good threads. Make sure you put in, just get your nut started down on the bottom of the bell crank before you hook up your skis. We'll hook up the ski ball joint once we get the shaft in. And you're going to take the shaft. Here's the new stopper. That's the slides right on. Move some stuff out of the way. That will slide right on. And then this is the new bushing. It's a shorter bushing. We'll go here. And then we're going to put this down inside there. And this little groove here has to line up with this little, there's a little flat spot, which would be opposite side of the bell crank. It's a little flat spot. This will go right in there. If it's off, you'll cover it. So you got to be able to see it in the slot. Another thing that I like to do is I like to put a little grease on here on both sides of those before I slide it in. So you can see the little flat spot is lined up. By leaving this loose, it helps push this shaft onto those splines. I've already had it where I tightened it up and I had a hard time because it's not perfectly straight when it's in, but it's it's pretty close. But once this is in perfectly, then you can drop that in, and that will hold the steering shaft to the EPS. And then up top, another trick is by turning this, you can see your alignment, plus you can have an area to tap on up top. If you need to drive it on a little bit, you just give a few light taps there. And then you can go ahead and tighten this up, drop on the upper block up on top, and then go ahead and start tightening up all these other screws on the bulkhead. And I'll come back once I got that done. Okay, I mounted the handlebars, made sure everything was tight, went through all of the bolts. I started to lay in the power harness, and the information harness goes to the EPS, and route that underneath here. We'll zip tie that down. We'll bring that up. We're going to try to keep it away from all the hot zones, and then we're going to bring it over here and tie it into the, this is where the ties into the information circuit, and then this power will get tied into the power lead here. And then on this end, we will do our positive and negative with a fusible link. Okay, we temporarily tied it into the battery, plugged it in down here into the inspection port. Normally this has a cap on it, which you'll take off. And then you tie into your power. And then to test it, you just turn it on. Well, you can see it's like butter. I can do it with my thumb. If I turn it off, I can't really do it with my thumb. It's pretty hard to turn. Again, look at that, like butter. And that's it. Basically what we're gonna do next is we're going to reassemble. We'll take the hood off because we just temporarily put the hood on. We'll start reassembling everything, and I'll videotape a little bit of that as we put it together, and then I'll show you some final connections at the end. Okay, I'm putting everything back together. The first thing that I usually do is I slide the boot over, kind of get that all put back on, and then if you put the whole assembly together, put in the top two screws here first, this one, and then one on each side, then tip it, get the bottom screws in, the little hex guy, 3/8, then put the center one in, and then the two lower Torx ones, and then fasten that in place tight, and then this will get held down by the plastics. We snap the fuse block on. Prior to snapping the fuse block on, we put in the bank of sensors that get screwed down to the bulkhead, and then from here we'll put the rest of the plastic on. Okay, we finished up putting the plastic on. The charge tubes, routed the power and the EPS information cable down into there, buttoned everything else up in its normal spots, zip tied these down, and then we will work to the back of the machine and finishing up the wiring. Okay, we just finished up the EPS installation. It's all tucked away nicely underneath there. I just finished up all the wiring, power wiring. Here's the information cable and power cable tied in down here. I showed you earlier where to tie that in. It's basically right in this plug right there. Here's the power cable. The ground is up here to the ground. Then I have a fuse block here, and then it's tied in over here. And that's it. Gonna throw the side panels on, and I gave it a test and everything worked out perfectly. Thanks for watching.